Good morning and welcome to the Virtual Item Writing Training Zoom webinar. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. A question and answer session will follow the presentation. You can type your questions in throughout this webinar by typing them in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. I will now turn the conference over to our host, June Halper.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is an absolute treat and pleasure to meet with you on a Saturday morning, but also the fact that we're going to be learning some very, very important and exciting material. Our dear friend and colleague, Karen Sturgis-Vera, she's the Associate Director of Psychometric Services, has worked with the IOMSN and our certification board, the MSN-ICB, for a number of years. And she came up with this very clever and generous suggestion of helping us learn and redefining our skills in item development guidelines. Karen is the Associate Director of Psychometric Services at Professional Testing Corporation, which is the organization that helps us administer all the certification tests, but particularly the one we've been working on recently, the MSN-ICB test, which is the test that validates nursing skills and knowledge in MS nursing. So Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you so much for your generous offer. I'm really excited.
Oh, this is fun. Thank you, June. So this particular presentation is geared towards the nurses, the MSCN program, but it can apply to any program involved in certification. So if you're in one of the other programs, please bear with me as I go through the presentation. This is an overview. First, I'll go over the goal of item writing, why we're doing it in the first place, then the general exam development process, eligibility requirements I have just for the nursing program, not for the others. So for those of you who are participating in this but are associated with the other programs, you can look at the eligibility requirements for your particular program. I'll then talk about how to begin writing an item, the correct structure for an item, our general item writing guidelines. We have several examples. Also, how to submit items in the next step. And then I'll do a Q&A when I will try to go to your list of questions that you submit and answer your questions at the end of the program. Also, at the very end, after this is over, I and MSN-ICB will be sending a link to the presentation itself. I will be sending the PowerPoint slides, and along with a couple of other documents that you might find helpful when you are going about writing your items. And the goal of item writing basically is to create a set of quality multiple choice items that will be used on the exam for the certification program. We want items that will effectively discriminate between candidates who should be awarded the credential and candidates who are not. So basically, we're looking at items that are they test what should be tested. They ask questions that are relevant to a person taking the exam. For example, if it's for nursing, you're not going to be asking questions about, I don't know, something that's not even related to multiple sclerosis, but something you want to be asking things specifically about multiple sclerosis nursing situations or specialist situations. You want the items to be fair for the candidates who just meet the eligibility requirements. So these are not items that you would only expect super experienced people to know. You want the knowledge that's described in the content outline to be somewhat part of the item, not something that's outside of the scope of what the exam is supposed to be about. And also to adhere to the guidelines that I'll be presenting. If you adhere to the guidelines, you reduce the probability that a candidate will just guess the correct answer rather than actually knowing the information. I do want to express that any items you write are are written on behalf of ICB and are the exclusive property of ICB. You may not keep copies of the items you've written, even though you are the one who wrote them. You should not share any of them for other than with ICB people. And you shouldn't submit items that you've already submitted for other programs for other purposes. The exam development process is actually rather lengthy. It starts at the far left of this slide, the job task analysis, which is a process for determining what types of things the candidate should actually do as part of the job, either as a multiple sclerosis nurse or multiple sclerosis specialist. From that, we derive the content outline, which is also the test blueprint, which determines how many questions of what type of knowledge or skill should be on the exam. Then we get to the item writing. Once we know what we need to write about, we get to the item writing, and then we review the items. We put select items onto an exam draft, review the exam draft, and then we set a passing score for the exam, that particular exam. The exam is administered. The candidates give their responses. We review the candidate responses and then send out the resulting scores. And then the cycle begins again with a new round of item writing. So that's where we are at the item writing section now. For the MSCN program, it is recommended that a candidate have at least 2 years of experience. That is a recommendation, not a requirement. What is required is that the candidate currently be registered as a registered nurse or equivalent if in another country. And a copy of that license or equivalent must be uploaded with the application to prove that they are in fact eligible to take the exam. So when we're looking at item writing, we're thinking of someone who definitely is a licensed nurse or equivalent and probably has 2 years of experience specifically in multiple sclerosis as a discipline. So where do we begin? One of the first places to begin is reviewing the content outline and the writing assignment that's been given. All of the items must be connected to some part of the content outline. Decide on what kind of content to write about. You think about what should the candidate know and why should the candidate know this? How will knowing this or doing this correctly make the job performance more effective? Is this relevant to practice? Is it relevant to this practice rather than some other practice? And is it current best practice? As we know in the multiple sclerosis field, things change all the time. So when you're writing an item, you want to keep in mind what current practice is, not what it was 5 or 10 years ago when you yourself might have gotten your certification. Is this based on generalized or specialized knowledge? For example, multiple sclerosis nursing might cover a wide variety of things, and so a multiple sclerosis nurse will need to know a lot of things in general, but maybe they don't need to know very, very specific things that a specialist in some other field might, or a more specific region might need to know. We also want this to be broadly based, kind of universal practice, so that what's practiced in California that might not be practiced in Florida will still be applicable. You want this to be accepted practice really around the world, because we also have international candidates. And is it appropriate for the candidate population based on eligibility criteria? Like I said previously, written for someone with who's a licensed nurse but with 2 years of experience, not written at the level of someone who would need 10 years of experience to be able to know the correct answer. So to generate ideas, think of someone who has just those 2 years of experience, what they might or might not have known at that time of their career, and what kinds of things they might have had difficulty in implementing. You can draw on work experience, your real life experiences, situations that came up for you that someone you knew or someone you heard of did not have the competence in a certain particular situation, and it might have resulted in harm to somebody. And we want issues that arise when their current best practice might not be followed. Those types of things that if best practice is not followed, then the patient might be harmed in some way. We want you to also think about references and reading materials, draw upon those. We want the items to have some backing behind them, not just what you heard was a good idea. You want to have something that people can refer back to as, yes, there is evidence that this is a correct way to do something. This is actually best practice. You can look at common misconceptions, common errors people make, misunderstandings, misinterpretation of standards, and topics. We want these to be topics that are not controversial and are not likely to change in the near future, because if it changes 2 years from now, then that item will no longer be appropriate to be on the exam. The item structure. We use multiple choice items that have 4 options. The STEM is what we call the question itself or the premise. And then there are the 4 answer choices, one of which is the key, which is the correct answer, and the other 3 are distractors. On the right-hand side, the acceptable items are 4 option multiple choice items. These can be part of situations or scenarios in which you create a situation text and then base 2 or 3 or more questions on that. But we do not want to fill in the blank, true or false, open-ended or essay, asking someone to rank the order of things or to match things. And another thing we want to avoid is all of the above or none of the above, because in that case, either nothing is correct or all of them are correct. We want only one correct answer out of the 4 alternatives. So here we have the STEM at the top. In which U.S. city is the Willis Tower located? That is a full question. That's the STEM. Of the 4 answer choices that we have, or options, we have Chicago, which is the key. Newark, San Francisco, New York City are the distractors. They are incorrect, absolutely incorrect answers, because if people know Chicago, I personally do not. But if people know Chicago, then they will know that that's where the Willis Tower is located, not someplace else. We have 2 ways of framing an item or the STEM. One can be a direct question with a question mark at the end, like which of the following was invented by Thomas Edison. You can also have a sentence completion or an incomplete statement. Thomas Edison invented the, and then you need to find the answer at the end of the, finish the sentence from what is offered as the options at the, as the 4 options. And in this case, we know that he invented the light bulb. If you use a direct question, it needs to end with a question mark. And then the option choices begin with a capital letter, but no period. If it's an incomplete statement or a sentence completion, then the options do not have capital. They just finish the sentence and end with a period. The STEM should be clearly and concisely stated so that it presents the complete premise of the item, the idea that the item is trying to convey. So most of that idea is in the phrasing of the STEM rather than in the phrasing of the options. A candidate reading the item should determine what the item is trying to address, what it's trying to get out, without having to rely on all of the options to figure it out. It has a single focus based on the important learning objective that you're trying to reach, and it does not deal with trivial information that's not necessary for answering the question. It poses a problem to which there is only one correct answer, and it's not likely to change in the future. For example, who is the current president would not be appropriate because presidents change every 4 years, at least in the United States. Is stated positively and in the third person, not you or I, but a third person, the candidate, the nurse, the whomever you're writing about, the patient. It states the information simply to support the goal of testing the information, but it does not teach information. And it uses should instead of would because you want the candidate to express best practice, not what someone else might do or would do in the situation, but what should be done in the situation. So for example, we have the question here, an elevated blood cell count is, well, the correct answer is sign of infection, but it's kind of unclear what you're trying to get out because it could be dangerous, it could be normal, it could be any count over 20,000. It's better to express this as an elevated white blood cell count is most often symptomatic of something. That gives the complete idea to the candidate what is being asked, and it's most often symptomatic of infection rather than diabetes, high blood pressure, or respiratory insufficiency. The distractors, the incorrect answers choices are in line with what the correct answer is. They're similar in nature, so the candidate really needs to discern which of those things is the correct answer rather than just saying, oh, well, this is not about whether it's dangerous or not. This is about infection. So for this one, we have a very long stem with a lot of information that might not be necessary. We want the stem to be presented simply. Instead of reading all about Mr. Watson being a 73-year-old widower, we just want to know what should be the first procedure to diagnose the probable cause of chronic headaches in an otherwise healthy 73-year-old man. You don't need to waste the candidate's time reading information or reading text that is not necessary to answer the question. The sun is the star at the center of the universe. It has all this information, but what you really want to ask is just what percentage of the sun's mass consists of hydrogen. Approximately 75% of the sun's mass consists of which of the following is really all you need to ask. You don't need this extra information that is almost like teaching the candidate rather than asking the candidate what the candidate knows. This is an example of a negatively phrased question. We like positively phrased questions because putting not in there can kind of trick the candidate because they're normally not thinking of the negatives. They're looking for which thing is in California. This question is not a city in California. It's better to ask, in what state is the city of Boise located? Because what you're trying to get at is Boise, not California. We also want something, enough text in the stem so that the candidate knows what's fully being asked. You need all of the information. So a skyscraper is a building that's higher than all of these things could be correct, but it's more precise to say what is the minimum height for a building to be considered a skyscraper. Because if if a building is 758 feet, that's above 492, it also would be considered a skyscraper. But what you really want to know is at what level would a building be considered a skyscraper. A lot of times people just want the candidate to recognize what an acronym stands for. This might be necessary in some situations, but in most cases it's not as necessary as knowing what the National Recovery Act actually was about. NRA can stand for many, many things depending upon the context. But if you're trying to ask a question about the National Recovery Act, ask a question about the National Recovery Act. What legislation was passed by Congress during the Great Depression and later was found to be unconstitutional. And then you have different acts there rather than just words that start with N and R and A to create possible names for an acronym. When you set up the answer choices, they should grammatically follow from the stem. Things that do not grammatically follow from the stem might be a clue that it's not the correct answer. You should use language that's familiar to candidates, not so specialized that For example, if you're talking about sandwiches, someone might know what a submarine sandwich is, but not know what a hoagie or a grinder is because of a regional difference in terminology. So you want language that's familiar to candidates, not just across the United States, but internationally as well. They should look similar to each other in structure, content, level of detail. They should avoid using absolute terms, always, never, all, none. Those very often are clues that that is not a correct answer because there are very few absolutes in the world. You should have only one specific answer. Therefore, all of the above and none of the above are not appropriate because there should be one correct answer, just one. But the options are feasible, but they're not correct. And so when you have just one correct choice, you don't have an option that says A and B, but not C. Just have one that's correct and not a combination of things. The word or phrases should be similar in all answer choices. If they are similar or direct duplication, if it's in all of the 4 option choices, somehow incorporate that information into the STEM. So candidates only need to read that once. They don't need to read it with each option. And they should be mutually exclusive of each other. For example, ice forms on water when we have the temperature falls below in each of these 4 options. So that information could go up into the STEM so that the candidate reads that once, the temperature falls below, and then they just need to choose which actual temperature is the threshold at which water becomes ice. Idaho is known for all these different things, but they're not similar types of things. The location of the tallest mountain is not a similar thing to having the nickname of the Big Apple. They're all, the options are completely different in types of things. It's better to ask, if you want to get to the point that Idaho is a distributor of potatoes, then that should be the question. Idaho is most widely known for its production and distribution of potatoes rather than corn, wheat, or tomatoes. In this case, in this option, this example here, we have overlapping answers. Recommended dosage of acetaminophen should be taken every 2 to 4 hours, 4 to 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours, 8 to 10 hours. Well, option 2 is correct, but that if the correct answer is 4, then 1 and 2 could be correct. If the correct answer is 6, then 6 and option 2 and option 3 could be correct. So you want to make sure that they don't quite overlap. So if you make your ranges 1 to 3 hours, 4 to 6 hours, 7 to 9 hours, there's no overlapping there, and there's only one that is actually the correct answer. The key, there's only one and one correct answer. The key is what we call the correct answer. It is unquestionably correct for people who are competent as a multiple sclerosis nurse. It's unquestionably correct in practice. It can be supported by reference material, and other subject matter experts all agree that this is really the one correct answer. It shouldn't stand out from the options because it's longer or more technical or in some other way making the eye go straight to that rather than fully examining the other options. It is not the correct answer should not use something that appears in the STEM unless other distractors also use that word, because that could be another clue that this is the correct answer. And you have some kind of documentation that from a current acceptable resource that this is the correct answer, so that if any other subject matter expert who's reviewing it, or a candidate who reads it and says, oh, but that's not correct, that you have a way of saying, but this is the evidence that we have that this is actually a correct answer. The distractors, writing the distractors is often the most difficult part of writing an item because you know the answer, but you need to find 3 plausible but incorrect options. And they need to be written at the same level of detail or content as the key itself. If the key is precise and detailed, then the 3 options should be precise and detailed. The options should be logical and plausible, but absolutely incorrect if a candidate actually knows the material. And they're not humorous. They shouldn't be put in there to make the candidate laugh, because that is going to be easily ruled out. And that increases the candidate's chance of just guessing the answer rather than knowing the material. The effect of poor distractors is precisely because it changes the probability of a candidate choosing the correct answer because of actually knowing the answer rather than knowing how to guess. If you can eliminate distractors, you reduce your chance of, you improve your chance of guessing from 25% to possibly 100% if all 3 distractors are so obviously wrong that even I would be able to guess the correct answer. An example of a poor distractor: in which of the following U.S. cities was President Kennedy assassinated? Dallas is a city and is in the United States. Indiana is not a city. Kentucky is not a city. Frankfurt, spelled this way, it's in Germany, not in Kentucky. So Frankfurt also is not a city in the United States. So just knowing that, you would be able to tell that Dallas is the correct answer. An invertebrate is an animal that has a spine, lacks a spine. Those 2 things are complete opposites of each other. So a candidate would be able to narrow down, okay, it's probably just one of these 2 things. And that improves the candidate's chance of just guessing the correct answer. Serious communicable diseases can affect children in daycare facilities are, well, this can be given away because rheumatism and arthritis are not normally found in children. Type 1 diabetes is not a communicable disease. Neither is allergy to gluten and peanuts. So just by knowing that, a candidate would be able to get to the right answer because the distractors are easily eliminated. Which of the following safety measures should organizations require regarding transporting laptops containing confidential information during international business travel? That's kind of a long question, but if you're looking at traveling with laptop by car only, that's not feasible, especially for international business. Placing laptop in checked luggage is not safe, and so no one would do that. And it's not feasible to ban laptops during travel because everyone needs their laptops everywhere now. So just by looking at those distractors, you can tell that using passwords and encryption is the correct answer because the distractors are easy to eliminate. Earlier on, I mentioned that there are types of questions that can be fit with situations or scenarios. These types of questions come in a group. They present the candidate with brief and overall information about a situation or a scenario that can be used to answer several items. You can include things like graphs or charts, pictures, even a video, summary of patient information, or a description of a situation or problem that's encountered, and then have items that are independent of each other, but rely on that information in that situation text for them to be able to answer it. And I'm saying that these items should be independent of each other because sometimes some questions will be used on one exam and others not. So you can't have the answer of one question depending upon the answer of a previous question because they might not appear together. And also if the candidate chooses the incorrect answer for the previous question, it's more likely that they will get the succeeding question incorrect. So these items should be independent of each other as much as possible. And the information from one item should not provide a clue or a cue to the correct answer in a subsequent question. So this is what a situation type of item looks like. I have all of this information about a patient with multiple sclerosis requiring electric scooter for mobility. She slumps in her scooter. Her daughter helps her. The patient states her daughter, who is her caregiver, is moving away. The patient begins to cry and says she does not know what she will do when her daughter moves. Then I have on the right-hand side 2 possible stems that could go with this type of situation. What is an appropriate intervention for the patient? Which of the following is most important to consider when evaluating the patient's mobility issues? Both of these types of questions depend upon that situation, but question 2 does not depend upon question 1. And also with this type of situation, when you come, the answers, the STEM itself talks about an intervention for question number 1, but there might be multiple types of interventions that you might want to choose as the potential answer, and that will direct what the types of distractors would be for that particular question. We have different levels of cognitive levels for items. The most basic one, level 1, is knowledge and comprehension, in which basically you're asking the candidate to remember definitions of something, for example. Level 2, application and analysis. Level 3, synthesis and evaluation. They're actually applying their knowledge rather than just remembering the term for something. For level 1 knowledge and comprehension items, candidates are asked to recall or recognize previously learned material. They recall a fact or a definition. They remember and understand a principle, fact, or a standard of practice. We can think of this as book knowledge, something that they just learned. And a lot of verbs that are used in level 1 type of questions are identify something, recall something, you estimate something. For level 2, application and analysis, the candidate needs to know how and why something is done. Candidates are asked to relate and compare facts or analyze a group of facts to make an interpretation. So this type of situation is, this type of item will have more information in the STEM similar to the situation or scenario type of question. It requires application of an established theory, technique, or principle that the candidate knows, but then they need to apply that to answer the question. Synthesis and evaluation is the 3rd level. Requires candidates to use actual problem-solving ability, a little bit more involved than just analyzing a situation, to be able to formulate a plan or course of action to solve the problem being expressed in the question. The candidate will be able to evaluate a situation using facts to make a recommendation based on their analysis and evaluation of facts. And this allows the candidate to use deduction skills to evaluate a situation. It requires candidates to reorganize information in the premise and integrate it with conceptual knowledge that was learned previously and through practice to formulate a plan to solve the problem. And so using those 3 levels, what is the cognitive level of this particular item? When teaching patients about relapsing forms of multiple sclerosis, a nurse should describe a remission as a time of no neurologic activity, condition as steadily progressive, a relapse as a new onset of neurologic symptoms, etc. This is kind of a level 1 item because what it's asking is for the candidate to remember the definition of relapse in multiple sclerosis. Some ideas of how to turn this into a higher level cognitive thing, maybe instead of asking what the nurse should describe, you create a short description of a relapse and then ask what form or what is the patient experiencing, pseudo-exacerbation, exacerbation, a relapse, progressive symptoms, CIS, something like that, so that the candidate has to evaluate the patient's condition and then come up with the answer rather than just saying remembering what the definition of a relapse is. So this is an example of that type of thing. A 47-year-old patient with a history of relapsing multiple sclerosis complains of blurry vision. She admits that she was exercising in her garden in the morning, which was a warm, sunny day. So we're setting the situation that it's already known that she has relapsing multiple sclerosis, and she was exercising, and it was a warm day. So questions that could be related to this would be, which of the following is the patient most likely experiencing? Rather than having a definition of, I think this is Uthoff's phenomenon, you're describing the situation, and then Uthoff phenomenon would be one of the options. Which of the following would be an appropriate recommendation? That could be another question. Whether or not this is a situation with multiple questions attached to it, this could actually be the question following the first part of the STEM. And what would be an appropriate recommendation? Possibly to do her gardening at a cooler time of the day, or to wear cooling garments when she's out gardening, or something like that could be. The candidate would have to apply knowledge of ways to cool down, knowledge of what these symptoms are describing, rather than just defining something. When writing items, we also want you to avoid bias. Items should not have any characteristics that would result in differential performance of the candidates of the same ability, but from different groups, like a different ethnic or gender, cultural group, religious group. Is the content or language unfamiliar to some candidates because of the group that they belong to? Will members of one candidate group get the item correct or incorrect for the wrong reason? For example, not knowing the term for a religious holiday. Are there unintended clues included in the item that would influence performance of one group over another? If some things are more common in one socioeconomic group rather than another, would those words allow one group to answer the question correctly, and the other group would wonder, what in the world is that referring to? We also would like you to avoid stereotyping. The items should be free of material that may be interpreted as offensive, demeaning, or emotionally charged. For example, a police officer instead of policeman, because we don't want to imply that only men can be police officers. We want to avoid writing items that are stereotypical of occupations, like a nurse is she. We know very well that there are a lot of male nurses. And doctors, there are a lot of women who are doctors. So please don't refer to all doctors as he and all nurses as she, because that's a stereotypical type of situation. Unless it's imperative to the question, don't write questions that refer to someone's age or gender or ethnicity, unless it's important to the question. For example, for some etiology-based questions, it might be important to know that you're talking about the Black community when you're talking about sickle cell. Sickle cell, probability of getting sickle cell disease. Or you can talk about other groups that are more inclined to get one particular type of disease. You can specify that type of group, because there is evidence that it's not stereotypical, but these groups do tend to get things more often than other groups do. Also, we want to avoid stereotyping, so would not turn off or offend a candidate so that it could affect the candidate's ability to fully incorporate the information being asked of in the question. When you submit your questions, you'll be using this type of form. But first, I want to share a different, I'm sorry. So when you submit your questions, you'll be using this type of form. You'll put your name, the examination name, because we want to be clear that it's for the MSCN or the MSCS or some other program. Your email address, in case we need to get in touch with you for clarification, or if you forgot to put in the reference. Phone number is not so important. The STEM goes in the top box, and then the options, including the key, go in these other boxes. The correct answer please indicate that because I will not know what the correct answer is myself. And the content code that corresponds with the content outline. And if you can, 2 references would be appreciated. I will go back to the PowerPoint. Oops. Excuse me. Okay. And so in those spots, please put the references and the content codes, including a citation of a reference to support the answer in case during item review or some other time we need to refer back to it to see that it is actually a correct answer. This happens all the time, especially when things change in the field. If something has changed since the earlier time that you wrote your question, it's very helpful for the item reviewers and exam reviewers to refer back to the reference that you gave to make sure that that is still considered the correct answer, and that what you're asking about is still relevant. And you should have the content code indicating what part of the outline that item refers to, so that when we put exams together, we include the right number of items for each domain to coincide with the test specifications for the exam. So all items should have content code, please. So assigning of a content code, this is an example. This is the question I asked earlier about describing during nurse describing what a relapse is to a patient. Now the content code for this, you can look at this particular item in 2 different ways. You're talking about teaching patients, so it could go under patient education, but it also could be coded to definition of relapse based on where you think it is most appropriate to put this in the content outline. Before you submit your items, please walk away from the item for a little bit so you have a chance for it to kind of sit for a while. Come back to it, carefully read the STEM to make sure that it is clear and concise, and assure that each of the options are clear and concise, and that there is only one correct answer and the other 3 are plausible but are not correct. Make sure that the correct answer is identified on the in your item before you submit it, and that you have the content code assigned for the correct domain, and that you have a reference. Common flaws that you should be aware of, that the distractors are implausible and unchallenging, so that they're easily eliminated by the candidate. Also, please be aware that sometimes people put in more than one correct answer in their item. We need to have only one correct answer, not multiple correct answers. There should be enough information in the STEM, but not too much information for the candidate to be able to look at the options and decide what is the correct answer. We don't want the key to easily stand out. The words from the STEM should not be repeated in the key or the other options unless it's repeated multiple times, so it's not makes it easy for the candidate to eliminate it. Please avoid as much as possible any grammatical errors. We do have editors who will be helping with that, so we do want you to concentrate more on the ideas in your item rather than getting everything grammatically correct. But if you get it grammatically correct, then it's more likely that we also will understand what the point that you're trying to make. Please make sure that your item does not target trivial information. For example, for a long time, hand hygiene, maybe a lot of people didn't know that you're supposed to write for wash your hands for 20 seconds. But now that might be considered something that everybody knows, because even I know after COVID, everyone knows that you're supposed to wash your hands for 20 seconds. And look at those things that you come up with that are at level 1 cognitive level that are just simple definitions, and see if there's some way that you can transform that into a level 2 or level 3 higher level cognitive question. Now I want to practice with you, and actually at this point some of you might want to come out of the mute excuse me. I want to start sharing the submission again. Where did it go? I'm sorry. I've misplaced the the submission. So I had wanted to practice writing an item, but I seem to have lost what I was going to use for that. So the next steps are you will be receiving follow-up information from both ICB and myself. I'll be handing out, I will be sending this PowerPoint presentation along with the item submission form, a quick reference guide, and a guide to developing items, along also with the a content outline indicating which areas for MSCN we really need more items for. MSN ICB will be sending out a link to this recording because they are the ones managing the recording. Please refer to these materials when you're writing your items, and we will be hoping to do our first item reviews of these new items in April of 2023. So please send your items to me, excuse me, no later than April 1st of next year. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to me at the email here, ksturgis-vera@ptcny.com. And now I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions, and I don't see any open questions.
It's just a reminder to the audience, you could submit your questions by typing them in the Q&A box found at the bottom of your screen.
Does anyone have any questions?
I don't see a Q&A box, Karen. It's June.
Oh, that's with Zoom, so I don't see where
I went into chat. The operator, I went into chat, and I typed my question under chat.
Okay,
if you see on the bottom of the chat there, yeah.
I see in the chat. Can you show us or tell us what content and content codes look like? I am going to try to, okay, here we go. Share. Okay, so here's the content outline for the MSCN program. This is also found in the candidate handbook for MSCN. And so a content outline is like this. And for example, if you're writing something on axonal damage, which is an area that we really need items for, you would code it as 1B5. So it's in domain 1, concepts underlying clinical practice, subdomain B, pathophysiology of multiple sclerosis, and then the next subheading is 5, axonal damage. So for example, if you're writing something in domain 2, assessment and intervention for clinical practice, if you're writing something about supportive care, it would be 2A for pharmacologic therapies, 1, relapse management, B, supportive care. And so you would put it in that order, Roman numeral 2, A, 1, B.
How often, Karen, could you tell the audience how often this outline is updated?
It's usually updated every year or 2 years. It's reviewed by the board at various times. And every year I go through to find out which content areas are lacking in items, and I've done that just this past month. So the this content outline, as indicated, with items that have less than 5 in the item bank and areas that have none at all, was updated just this past month.
And so the listeners on this call will be getting this as well as.
Yes.
Right. Excellent.
This, as well as the item submission form, the PowerPoint presentation, and the other materials for how to write, reminders of how to write items.
Terrific.
And then you will be sending out the link to the recording itself.
Guys, ask questions. This is your chance to ask questions.
Okay, so someone asked, if we submit questions to you, when will we know if the questions have been accepted? I can let you know that we received them. It will be the spring of 2023 when we start to review them for inclusion in the item bank. But when we get to that point, we remove identifying information so that there's no reason for the item reviewers to be biased as to how they look at that particular item. So we probably will not be able to tell you that, yes, your item has been submitted, accepted and included in the item bank unchanged. But if you like, I can let you know that we did receive your items.
Well, the reason they're asking is because we do give CEs based on your advice. There's continuing education credits, which apply to recertification. That's why they're concerned.
Okay. So in that case, I will let, once I receive the questions, I will let June and Lenny know that I received so many from such person and they seem to be complete. And I won't be able to tell you that they were approved into the item bank until the item review itself, but at least when I receive them, I can let the CEU people know that they were complete with a full stem, the 4 questions, the key was provided, the content outline, the content coding was provided, and there was at least 1 reference provided. I can give them, as soon as I receive them, I can give June and Lenny that information.
Okay. And there's some questions now. I see them popping up.
Okay. Yeah, I see. The person who submitted that question said, thanks. Anyone else have any other questions? Oh, could you show the slide with your email again? That will be included in the PowerPoint that I send to you. Any other questions?
Once again, just type your questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen.
If anybody have any questions, don't be shy, guys. You don't have to tell us your name, but this is your chance. And we really do need questions, as Karen said. Oh, somebody raised their hand.
Oh, that's you, June, I think.
Me? Really?
I have a hand up for you. I don't know if someone else also
Yes,
did.
June. I can lower it for you. I actually do have one in the audience as well. Let me just go ahead and unmute that. And the line for Marie Namey, go ahead and unmute yourself.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I had asked the question about when do we know if the items that we submitted were accepted. That was my question.
Okay. Did you have any other questions?
No, I've wanted to write questions, but I've been hesitant because of time and whatever. But this has been such a good overview. It has been very encouraging for me to get down on my haunches and write some questions for you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if it's an easier way to get started, just keep with the level 1 until you feel more comfortable, and then you can progress up to the level 2, level 3, and then maybe even situations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Marie, also just know when the committee meets, even if it's a level one, they play around with it and they can make it more complex. So sometimes the basic level one ideas generate some very good questions.
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
And that's why I said I can't say that your item was approved unedited, because they do go through an editing process, not just grammatically, but also content-wise, and trying to make it a more challenging question if it's a more basic question during the item review process.
Thanks again.
And that's another thing. Your questions as they are written are not just put on as they are approved in the item bank. There is that level of item review. And then during exam reviews, they are looked at again for not just for relevance, but to make sure that things are very clearly stated.
Yeah. Osama, are you on the phone? Osama? Osama is calling in from the Middle East. I think I asked him to get on to learn a little bit more about questions. Osama, can you hear me?
If you want your line open, just click raise hand on your screen and we'll open your line for you.
And in the meantime, Lana has put in the Q&A chat, will we be
Oh, good.
notified when our question is a dud and needs a rewrite?
That's a good one.
Sometimes even those that are not duds do get rewritten just because of during the item review process, people will think, you know, we have a whole lot of questions that are very similar to this. Let's change this a little bit. It has very good content. Let's change it slightly so that it's asking something slightly different than was originally written. So don't consider it a dud. A lot of things get rewritten even when they're not duds.
Hey, Pat Melville, are you on?
Oh, and Osama just said, yes, please.
Oh, good. Can you open up his, Osama's, I don't know where he is now, but I met him at Menactrum's. He's out in the Middle East. Osama?
Okay, Osama was asking about.
Osama, go ahead and unmute yourself, then you could speak. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Osama. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, you could ask a question. Go ahead, Osama.
Yes, I was asking about if we can get a question bank like some review or books like for يعني high number of questions for training for the exam.
Yeah,
We do.
Yeah, Osama is very concerned, Karen, because he did do the practice test, and I did send him in my book. In the back of my book, there are practice questions, but they're not used to multiple choice in the Middle East. They usually use either one or two answers, or true or false.
Okay.
So anything you could suggest for them to help practice to taking multiple choice?
Just the practice test that's available. We cannot send you things from the active item bank because that would compromise security.
Because the practice test is even with without answers, and we have in our area maybe some different culture and different situations. So maybe I study the book of John and study any other books also, but the way of the questions, sometimes I know the answer, but sometimes I'm confused about this.
Okay. Unfortunately, at the moment, the practice test as it is now does not have answers. It just gives you a feel for, as you know, how the questions are that will appear on the exam. But we don't give, at least from the certification side, we don't give educational materials or training in how to take a test.
Yeah, we've been doing that. But I remember, Karen, you helped me though. Remember there was a time when you had some questions that were not going to ever be used again. Because they just want to practice taking multiple choice. If there's a time that you have questions that we're never going to use, maybe we can put it together and send it over to him so he can share it.
Those would be the ones that we have in the practice test bank.
Yep.
And I don't know if there are any more than what are on the current practice test, but I can look into that.
Good.
Or,
Okay.
or even to consider for the Arab stuff to avoid in the exam this the foreign words or switching words, because maybe the language also different.
Right.
Sometimes I know the answer, but in the question some word make me confused. It's a new word for me.
Okay, so
make me confused also.
okay. If you could let us know what those words are when you're looking through the practice test or the examples that June has already given you, then we can consult with our experts here to find out how to express that content in a way that would be understandable around the world rather than just in the United States. It's very important for us to know, because we don't know on our end which words or which terms are confusing to people from other countries.
No, just to be in simple question only, and to say in simple way only.
Okay.
We will figure it out, Osama. Don't worry.
Okay.
Bye. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
June, I think you were asking if Pat Melville is on.
Yeah, I saw her signed up, but I don't know if she's on anymore. Patricia Melville, are you on?
Patricia Melville, just click raise hand on your screen to open your line. You're actually now, Patricia, you could go ahead and unmute yourself and you could speak at this time. Go ahead.
Yeah, Patty, you still there?
She's connected. That line is connected. They're just not unmuted.
Oh, okay.
Any additional questions? Once again, just click raise hand on your screen or type them in the Q&A box.
Yeah, Karen, I see a question here. Do the questions need to be accepted for review to receive CE credits, or are the CE credits awarded for simply submitting the questions? The way we do it, to carry, is we give you credit for submitting. You get 3 credits for 5 questions, whether or not they're accepted or not. Once you submit them, Karen lets us know that the questions are in. If they're not complete, of course, obviously we can't give you credit. But if the questions are complete and we end up either editing them or not using them, that's not your problem. The fact is that you do the work, right?
Right.
So once you do the work and submit them and Karen says they're in, we do give you the 3 credits. Absolutely. And Eileen Scheid says, can you send them non-MS multiple choice to questions to answer? Well, Eileen, I'm not sure we can do what that means. We'd have to start writing lots of questions with or without MS as a topic. You want something to do in your retirement, Eileen Scheid? I'll give it to you. You ask for it, Eileen, you're going to get it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Marie Namey, are you still on? Marie Namey's originally from the middle. Her family's there. Well, do you have any ideas how we can help Osama, Marie? I'm wondering if she's still on. All right. Well, she might have gone off. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see that name on the list right now.
Yeah, she may have hung up.
No, Marie.
Oh, wait, she's right here. She just go ahead, Marie.
Okay, thank
And
so, I mean, the questions don't have to be about MS in particular. They can be other questions with multiple choice answers, just to give them the practice of that type of question.
So what you're saying is we can maybe put together a bunch of questions to them
Well,
Just
it doesn't have to be MS related. It can be any disease state. These are all nurses. They've worked in other areas, so we can make up, or somebody can make up some questions about, general topics in taking care of patients.
And I would have to leave that to you experts because
Yep.
PTC would not be able to reveal anything from any of our other item banks either.
No. I
Right.
think Marie, you and I can talk offline to see if we can help. Anybody on this phone who wants to help we'd be more than happy to, get your questions.
Am I still muted or am I unmuted?
No, you're on.
Okay,
on.
so
Can hear-
would it be a conflict of interest if the people who are on the MSN ICB board to write some non-MS related questions?
I don't think we're going to be able to do that.
Oh, I mean, okay, just, because they know the drill better than anybody else in terms of how to set up the questions.
Well, that's why we had this course today.
Okay,
So
but
maybe some people on this line can help. Even if it's sending me a couple of questions, we can send it over to Osama or
Right.
and people over there.
okay.
Either that, Maria, we're going to have to send you over there to do some teaching.
Well, I'm my bags are packed, I'm ready to
I
go.
know.
Yeah.
I know.
Right.
Well, if there are no more questions, Karen, you did a great job. And
Thank you.
remember, anybody on the line is going to get this material. So it's not going to go off into cyberspace. You're going to have the slides. What else are you sending, Karen?
The content outline annotated with which areas we need more questions in, the item submission sheet, and a few other documents that are just shorter reminders of how to write questions. And the PowerPoint presentation. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all, everybody.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Oh, Brian Adamson has put in a link for Khan Academy with skill building for multiple choice tests. That might be a very good reference.
Oh, good. It's okay. Excellent.
Yeah, Khan Academy is well known. I haven't used it myself, but I have family members who have.
Well, Karen, this was terrific. Thank you so much for sharing your Saturday morning with us.
My pleasure.
And Lenny, thank you for setting this up as usual. And everybody, thank you for joining us today. And happy holidays. Enjoy and be very careful and be safe and be well. Karen, have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. All of you as well.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. That concludes today's webinar. All parties may disconnect. Have a good day.